كلية الفقه الحنفي تقدم
الحمد لله وحده والصلاة والسلام على من لا نبي بعده أما بعد سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا ربنا زدنا علما. After praising Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and sending salutations upon our Master Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the best of this world and hereafter, to create ease for us, to grant us beneficial knowledge and His pleasure. Ameen ya Rabbal Alameen. So for today we will be finishing off some of the rulings regarding i'tikaf, the spiritual retreat. We will go on to explaining whether a woman can perform this spiritual retreat and how she would go about doing so. And then we will go on to some rulings as to what you're allowed to do during the i'tikaf and what you're not allowed to do. We'll also discuss the concept of the i'tikaf and how it's different to the fast in terms of vowing, when a person vows to do this. So we will talk about these rulings. Next, then we'll move on to our major topic. Next major topic, you can say, is of zakat, almsgiving. We'll go through the definition that the jurists have mentioned. We'll break it down and try to understand what firstly zakat is defined as, then its obligation, who it is obligatory upon, when it becomes obligatory on that person. We'll talk a little detail here. So I'll mention some of the details at the beginning over here, so then it becomes easier later on when we discuss certain concepts. We'll talk about nisab, we'll talk about the hawl, the 1 year, and we'll also talk about debts, and then we'll actually mention the quantums in modern context as well. And I think we will get through that much today. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So now we move on to the ruling where it says the woman performs the spiritual retreat in that area of her house which she in general has designated for her prayer, the salat. So a woman can also do a spiritual retreat, but she will not do it in the masjid. She will do it in the designated prayer space, the prayer area of her house, her home. So if a woman does not have a designated prayer space, she prays anywhere in her home, then she must first designate a prayer space. So she will designate that this room, for example, is my prayer area, and then she will do i'tikaf in that prayer area. Now, a woman is not allowed to do an i'tikaf without having designated that prayer space to be that space to be the prayer space. Likewise, she can't just do an i'tikaf everywhere, anywhere in her house. That would not count as an i'tikaf, because the idea is that the prayer space is the prayer space that's needed is only small. It's not that much. So a small room, or any room, it doesn't, as long as it's not a big hall or something, right? But any smallish, or most of our houses will have a decent sized room. So any of these rooms will be allowed to be designated as the prayer space, and then she has to remain in that room now. Now, one point to note, that if a woman wants to do the i'tikaf, if she is married, she should take permission from her husband, because during this spiritual retreat of hers, the husband will not be allowed to sleep with her, to have sexual intercourse with her. So then she should take his permission. Once he gives the permission once, then he can't rescind that. He can't say that I'm taking it back or something, right? So she is also allowed to do this i'tikaf in her space. That's that. Moving on, it is permissible for the man performing the spiritual retreat to eat, drink, sleep, and even buy or sell in the mosque. So inside the place where you are doing i'tikaf in the masjid, obviously a person is going to be allowed to eat and drink and sleep. That's fine. But also, if they needed to buy or sell, they're allowed to do that. But provided that the commodity of sale is not brought inside the mosque, as to do so is disliked. So this would be makruh tahrimi if you brought these goods into the masjid. So it's important to remember that the goods cannot be brought into the masjid. Now, what do we mean by buying and selling? This is not just regular trading, daily, business trading and things. No, this is only if there was a need. So, for example, there were some people depending on you, dependents of yours that needed to be provided for, and this buying or this selling needed to take place to fulfill their need. So this is when this buying or selling will be permitted. Otherwise, a person should refrain from this during their i'tikaf. Moving on, it is also disliked to remain silent or to speak other than good. So this is the two extremes. Some people, they don't speak at all in i'tikaf. So during i'tikaf, during this spiritual retreat, it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to speak at all. Of course you're allowed to speak. So a person can speak, can talk to others inside the designated masjid area that you're there. That's fine, you can talk to others. But when you're talking to others, it should only be of good things. Yeah, it should be of good. It shouldn't be of just worldly affairs, just talking nonsense, just wasting time, because that's not something that you should be doing in the masjid. You shouldn't be wasting time, and certainly it should not be talk of sin anyway. So two extremes, some people remain completely silent, some people talk too much, so it's in between kind of thing, right? A person can talk, a person is allowed to talk, but you have to talk of only good things, not just worldly matters that are futile. So this is important to also remember. Yeah, if a person thinks that remaining silent is actually a worship, right, then this is actually prohibited. This is disliked, and a person is prohibited from doing this. Obviously, if a person stays silent because they fear that they won't be able to control their tongue and they end up, saying things which are sinful, then obviously this would take away the dislike, because they're doing it for a good cause, a good reason. So it's very much based on one's intention. Now, obviously, when we're saying remaining silent is not something, but if you are alone in the i'tikaf, you don't have to go around to try to find somebody just to talk to, right? It's fine. I mean, you've got nobody to talk to. You're not trying to remain silent. You just got nobody to talk to. It's fine. No problem. So that's the ruling that needs to be fully understood there. Moving on, it is unlawful, haram, to have sexual intercourse or to engage in any foreplay. Moreover, the retreat is invalidated by intercourse or by ejaculations due to foreplay. So if ejaculation takes place, or just intercourse whereby a person penetrates the tip of the penis, then that much itself is enough for it to invalidate the i'tikaf. The spiritual retreat will be invalidated. Once a person invalidates the spiritual retreat, just to mention, they must do qada of that. So they do qada of, let's say they were doing a spiritual retreat in the month of Ramadan for 10 days, and they invalidated it. So that one day, the day that they invalidated their i'tikaf, that day will have to be in qada of, not the remainder of the days, because those days haven't been started. You haven't started the i'tikaf of those days, yeah. But the day that you are in currently, you break it, you're going to have to do qada of it later. So when you do qada, you have to fast that day, and also have to obviously do qada of that 24 hours starting from Maghrib all the way till next day Maghrib. So this is something that a person should take into consideration. Lastly, it mentions if one makes a vow to perform the spiritual retreat for a certain number of days, he must remain in his retreat during the accompanying nights as well. So for example, a person says, they vow on themselves, they say that I will do i'tikaf for 2 days. So the 2 days that they're doing i'tikaf for, it means not just the daytime, because they said day, so I'm going to stay in there for day. No, it means the whole 24 hours. So, 48 hours, 2 full days they will have to stay in i'tikaf for, from starting from Maghrib, because then when a person does i'tikaf, the i'tikaf starts from Maghrib. So they have to be in the masjid from Maghrib time all the way till next day Maghrib. And then that's 1 day. And if they're taken, vowed to do 2 days, they'll have to carry on and stay for a second day from Maghrib till next day Maghrib. So 48 hours fully they would have to stay for. I mean, it might not be exactly 48 hours because Maghrib moves, but the point here is understood. So similarly, a vow of nights necessitates their accompanying days. So if a person vows that I will do i'tikaf for 2 nights, then the days that come along with it will also have to be, so the night starts first, or the night Maghrib time, and the day following it will be included here. So this type of retreat in either case must be performed in consecutive days and nights, not separately, even if he did not explicitly stipulate consecutiveness in the vow. So if a person said, like I said, it actually gives this example, if he makes a vow for 2 days, he must perform his retreat for the accompanying 2 nights as well. So and it has to be, meaning it has to be consecutive. So a person does not need to say consecutive for it, meaning for it to be a consecutive. A person took a vow that they will do i'tikaf for 5 days or 5 nights. Then these 5 have to be in a row, have to be consecutive. The idea here is, if you can compare this with the fast. So if a person took a vow that they will fast for 5 days, then it doesn't have to be in a row. It doesn't have to be, it could be 1 day here, 1 day a few days later, 1 day, sometime later, no problem, as long as they complete 5 days. Here, by default, it has to be 5 days in a row, or 2 days in a row. It has to be consecutive. Reason of difference between i'tikaf and fasting is because in fasting, the default is that it's separate. Why? Is because we only fast the day. We fast the daytime from Subh Sadiq all the way till Maghrib time. Then from Maghrib till Subh Sadiq, the night time, that is a gap, meaning Shariat already created that gap where you do not fast in. So because it's already gapped, the fast of a day is gapped with a night in between where you do not fast, with the next day's fast. There's a gap already created by Sharia. So that's why by default, when you say I will fast 5 days, it's already going to be gapped. So if you keep a further gap of another day or 2 in between, it's fine. It's no problem. There's no problem with that. But in the i'tikaf, there's no gap in between. I'tikaf is from Maghrib till Maghrib. So there's no gap created in between. So therefore, by default, when you say 5 days, what's going to be understood? 5 consecutive days. Unless a person explicitly states, if a person says, I'm going to do i'tikaf for 5 separate days. So 1 day here, 1 day some time later, one sometime, then that's fine. That's explicitly mentioned 5 separate days. So now it can be separated. You do 24 hours, and then sometime later you can do 24 hours. You can do it in a row too. But obviously if you stipulated 5 separate days, then it should be separate. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So now we move on to our next big topic of zakat, almsgiving. So we are now page 139. Zakat is defined as the transfer of ownership, tamlik, of a portion of wealth specified by the lawgiver to a particular person with its intention. So it's quite a bit here. We'll just break it all up to understand firstly. So zakat is, basic concept of zakat is a transfer of ownership, where you have to give ownership of that amount that you are giving. That 2.5% of a portion means 2.5% of your zakatable wealth. What is zakatable we'll talk about, but any zakatable wealth, any wealth that is going to be taken zakat of, 2.5% of that will be given. Right? Who will it be given to? To particular individuals, those who meet the requirements. Allah Ta'ala has mentioned them in the Quran. There are categories which we will talk about later, and it has to be done with its intention, meaning a person must have an intention to pay the zakat. Just like with any other worship, we have intention needed to make that worship, make that ibadah count. So when do you make the intention? There are different times as to when you can make the intention. First obvious time is when you are working out your zakat, you're calculating how much zakat you owe, and then you separate out that money. So if you separate out that money now, you've got a different pot to give zakat from. That is, if you made an intention then, that's sufficient. That intention, now every time you give from that pot, that will be a zakat. You don't have to have a separate intention afterwards. Likewise, if a person gave to the poor person, the person who's the legal recipient of zakat, you gave that person zakat with the intention that I'm giving you zakat, then that is also a valid time to make an intention. Or if you were giving it to an agent or some charity that's going to distribute on your behalf, then when giving it to them, at that time you made an intention, that will also be a valid point of intention. Now, if a person gave to the poor person, whilst the poor person still has that same, let's say it was money, they still have that same thing that you gave to them, the money, in their possession. Or if it was something else, like if it was rice or whatever else it was, they still have that in their possession. Whilst they have it in their possession, you can still make an intention if you haven't made your intention yet. So let's say a poor person came to me, they asked me for some, they were asking me some money. So I, went to my wallet, I felt sorry for them and gave him £20. I gave him some money. Then later I remembered, oh yeah, I should have made an intention of zakat. If they still have that in their possession, I can make an intention still. Likewise, telling the person, the recipient, that this is zakat is not necessary. It's not at all. You don't have to tell them. They don't need to know. You could tell them something else. Here's money. I'm giving you something. Here you go. This is, you could even tell them this is a loan and then never ask for it back. Tell them that, look, I forgive it afterwards. Meaning tell them later on that you've forgiven it. They don't have to pay you back. So the intention is the more important thing here, not any sort of verbal expression or anything like that. Then it says, moving on, it is obligatory fard on every free Muslim who is legally responsible and who possesses the quantum zakatable amount, which is the nisab, whether in monetary wealth or in trade goods, whose value is equivalent to the nisab of wealth, over which a full lunar year, which we call a hawl, has passed, in excess of any debts and of basic personal needs. So this is whom zakat becomes obligatory, a fard upon. So obviously there's a lot of conditions mentioned there. Let's go through each one. So firstly, it says it's upon every free Muslim. So obviously not on a slave, who is legally responsible, meaning sane, who is mature. So that is legally responsible, somebody mukallaf. Then it says the one who possesses the quantum zakatable amount of wealth, which is the nisab. So when we talk about nisab, let's just talk about this nisab in a comprehensive way, so whenever nisab comes up, we understand what it's talking about. So nisab is the quantum for the threshold, you can say, if you meet that threshold, if you meet that quantum, you, for example, pay zakat. But when we say nisab, there are two types of nisab. The threshold itself is the same, the amount of money is the same, the amount of equivalence to it is the same, that the line is drawn at the same place. So for example, if we talk about pounds, if the nisab amount was, for argument's sake, it was £250, then £250 will always be the line in both types of nisab. But what's counted in that nisab is different. So you've got two types of nisab, like I said, nisab of wujub az-zakat, and the second is nisab of hirman az-zakat. Wujub of zakat obviously means if you have that zakat, you possess that type of nisab, you have to pay zakat. And nisab of hirman, which is that if you possess that type of nisab, you cannot receive zakat, though it may not be that you pay zakat. Okay, but you cannot receive zakat. So that's something that you have to remember. So now, the nisab of wujub az-zakat is where a person possesses wealth, in essence wealth that is we call it nami, it's growable, it's something which is which has a potential of growth. So this refers to the amount of wealth. I'm reading from the footnote if you have it. This amount of wealth upon which zakat is due, specifically from one's monetary wealth, gold, silver, cash, stocks or whatever it is, livestock or trade goods, any business goods that person has. So all of that is included in the nisab of wujub. So you got cash, you got money, you got gold, you got silver, you got sheep that you are rearing to sell or whatever, or you got trade goods, or you got shares in a company or whatever it is that you've got. With the conditions mentioned above, that we already talked about this, the second type, which is the nisab of hirman, a minimum amount by which one would become ineligible to receive zakat. You can't receive zakat anymore, though he may not have to pay it either, as I've explained. Now, it says it is the same amount of wealth as the first type, yet is considered from any type of wealth other than one's basic personal needs. So that's the main thing. So nisab of hirman is anything besides your essential needs. So for example, if I will give my example, so if a person has let's say a person has 10 pairs of shoes, they don't need 10 pairs of shoes. So whatever they need, whatever is their basic need, so let's say a person says that, okay, I need normal casual wear, okay, that's one. I need a smart wear because I need to go to certain places, that's a need, okay. I need a sport wear, for running or for, playing certain games or whatever it is, so that's another one. I need a slipper for summer, so I've got that. So like this, you can count whatever is needed. Now you've counted whatever is needed. The ones beyond that need, the second smart wear shoe, the second casual wear shoe, it's beyond need, okay? So that will all be included within this nisab of hirman at its current value, whatever the current value is if you were to sell it now. So anything in excess, so let's say a person has their own home, but they also have another house, they have another home, okay, it's a holiday home, for example. They're not selling it, but that will also be included. Or they bought that house, why? Because when my child grows older, this will be my child's later on, but at this moment in time is theirs. So it's not for selling or anything. Yeah, so that house will also be included within that nisab of hirman. So the idea behind this, if you can understand, is, let's say if a person is, splashes the cash, they splash it all about. So they got money, they're rich enough, but they go off and they buy 10 pairs of clothes, they buy 20 handbags, or they buy 20 pairs of whatever things that are extra. They end up spending. Then now they're saying, oh, I don't have any money, oh, I'm poor, give me zakat. We're going to say, hold on a minute, you spent all your money in an irresponsible way. Who told you to buy all these extra things? So Shariat would in essence say, go sell those things first. If you don't meet the requirement of zakat now, the nisab now, after selling all those things, then we will give you zakat, because you're below the threshold of nisab of hirman. But otherwise you're not. So you're taking liberty here. So you can understand the concept of nisab of hirman is what I'm explaining here, that the nisab of hirman exists. Why? Because it will identify those people who are eligible to receive zakat. And the nisab of wujub, though this person doesn't have wealth to be able to pay zakat, because remember, paying zakat has to be wealth which has the potential of growth, which is obviously cash in itself, meaning gold and silver in itself, or anything that represents it, like cash. And likewise, business stock and things like this, because this has potential of growth, because this is something that will be sold on. So that is the nisab of wujub of zakat. Now we're just going to explain the rest of it. So we talked about the nisabs. So he says, whether monetary wealth or in trade goods, that's all understood, I've already explained, whose value is equivalent to the nisab of wealth. Now the nisab of wealth, in essence, is coming up in the next paragraph, in fact, so we'll do it there. Over which a full lunar year whole has passed. So what we mean is that a year has to pass in which a person was an owner of the nisab. It doesn't mean, which many people misunderstand here, they think that that wealth that I'm giving zakat of has to be in my possession for a year. No, that's not correct. You just have to have nisab for a year, and that too in the beginning and the end. So if, for example, if today a person became owner of nisab, before that they were not owner of nisab, so they became owner of nisab today, the nisab of wujub we're talking about, where zakat becomes wajib on this person now. So now what we will see is this time next year, we will see whether they're still owner of that nisab. They're not the same nisab, but owner of nisab. Obviously in between, money will be spent, it will be fluctuate up and down here and there, no problem. But as long as at the end of the year, they still possess the nisab, now a year has passed. That's what it means by a full lunar year. We're talking about lunar year, right? Has passed in excess of any debt. So that means, if they have this nisab for that 1 year, they will now have to give zakat. And then it says in excess of debts and personal needs. So meaning that if there are debts that they owe to people, this is debts that they owe to people, not debts like zakat or if there was any kafara or some sort of vow or something like that due, or even hajj, to the extent that a person was saving for hajj. These are not debts, okay, that are going to be validly considered here. We're talking about debts that are owed to human beings, fellow humans. Then these debts which are immediately repayable, there is somebody that they are asking for their money, and if you were to pay it today, they would gladly take it, the whole amount. So this is what we mean by debts, okay? Not the long-term loans that people take where they have a payment plan for, and you do not owe that full amount right now. So if you are paying in with a payment plan, then only that amount, which is maximum, you can say, there are two opinions regarding this, but the maximum, only the amount that you owe for this year, that amount you can deduct. Because what you owe next year, you will deduct next year when you calculate your zakat. So the idea is you can deduct this year's due, whatever is due, the debt's repayment this year, you can minus that from your total. So in excess of debts, that's what it means, that if a person has, let's say, £1,000, but they owe £200 to somebody, then they minus the £200, they only have to give zakat on the 800. The 200 is minus this, because anything in excess of debts will be paid zakat on. And obviously of basic personal needs. So what this means is that if a person has, so basic needs in essence is like, for example, your furniture in your house, your home itself, your clothing that you wear, your vehicle that you have, the car that you drive, the equipment if you're a professional and you need certain equipment, your in essence, your personal belongings. So like if you've got books that you read, if you are a person of knowledge and you've got certain specialist books as well, all of this will be under basic needs. Your watch, your mobile phone, okay? These are all basic needs that a person requires. So all of this will be included in basic personal needs. Now, I've already explained anything beyond that will not be the basic personal needs. So when it says in the actual text, when it says, and of excess of any debts or of basic personal needs, so those items that I just mentioned, your watch, your laptop, your computer, all of these things will not be included, though their value, they will not be included in nisab. Nisab of either nisab of hirman or nisab of wujub, they will not be included. Only time it will be included in nisab of hirman is beyond basic need. If it's within the basic need, it's something that you require, then it's not included. Moving on, the nisab of gold is 20 mithqal. This is where we talked about the nisab is coming up. So the nisab of gold is 20 mithqal, for which one pays half a mithqal. So obviously 20 mithqal, 2.5% of that, if you work it out, is half. So 0.5. So you pay 0.5, half a mithqal. So this is nisab of gold. This is if a person has only gold. They have nothing else. So if they have only gold, they go with the gold nisab, the 20 mithqal of gold, which is 87.48 grams of gold. Because one mithqal is around about 4.374 grams. So if you work out 20 is 87.48 grams if you round it up of gold. There is obviously difference of opinion regarding all of this, but we're just going with the most famous opinion. And the nisab of silver is 200 dirhams. So 200 dirhams is 512 point let me just check. So 612, I thought so I was getting right. 612.48 grams. Sorry, 68. Sorry, 36. Yeah, sorry, 612.36. That's the correct figure, right? 612.36 grams of silver. Okay, so 200 dirhams is 612.36. Excuse the incorrect numbering, but now you got this correct, okay? So that's the nisab of silver, 612.36 grams of silver. Now you go with the silver, generally you go with the silver when there is a mixture of silver, gold and other things, cash, then you go with the silver amount because this is more beneficial for the poor. You end up more people paying zakat. If a person only had silver, they obviously go with silver. If a person only had gold, they go with gold, the nisabs. Because obviously you can see, if you work it out, the value difference between them is quite considerable. I mean, there is a difference of opinion as well here. I mean, as there would be for so many things, that we go with the gold only because the silver has now depreciated. I mean, that opinion exists, but we tend to give the ruling on the silver because you end up having more people doing a worship, a ibadah, and it's relative, 2.5% of your wealth. It's not going to make you poor. So the nisab of silver is 200 dirhams, for which one pays 5 dirhams, because 200, if you see 100 is 2.5, so 200 is double, so 2.5 will be double, which is 5 dirhams. It says for any amount above the nisab, if it increases to a fifth of the nisab, one pays its proportionate amount due, yet pays nothing if less than a fifth. Now this is an old mas'ala. This is no longer the case. The reason Imam Saab mentioned this, you can understand, is because the smallest thing you can give, if you say you've got dirham and dinar, is going to be 1 dinar. You can't give anything less than that, right? Or, yeah. So the idea is, if a person possesses it's 2.5% in essence is 1/40th. 1/40th. That's the same in terms of fraction. 2.5% is 1/40th. So every 40 you give 1. That's the idea, right? Every 40 you give 1. So if a person possesses, let's say for instance, a person possesses 400 dirhams, right? If a person possesses 400 dirhams. So for 400 dirhams, a person will have to give how much? 10, right? Because if 100 dirham is 2.5, times it by 4 is 10, right? So you've got 400 dirhams, you're going to have to give 10 dirhams in zakat. Now, if a person has 401 or 402, how is this person going to give what they're going to give? Because when the person has now 440, 40 extra, that's when you give 1 more, because every 40 you give 1, right? So 440, you give 1 more, which the 10 now becomes 11, so you give 11 dirhams. But there's nothing in between 10 and 11 dirhams. There was no coin to represent anything between 10 and 11 dirhams. So the question was, how is a person going to give zakat on 410, 411, 15, whatever it is in between 400 and 440. So that's why the masala over here is mentioning that you jump 40s after, you get to the threshold of zakat, and that's nisab. After that, you jump in 40s to give 1 every time. The next 40, you give one extra every time. So this was the mas'ala according to Imam Sahib rahmatullahi alayh. However, that's the one that's mentioned here, and that's the one he's gone with, because obviously coins perhaps were like that in their time. But Sahibain had the opinion of giving it on even the everything. And nowadays we can give it on everything. I mean, to the penny we can work it out, to the to the dollar, right to the edge, to the cent. You can say a person can work out what they have to give. So that's fine. A person will give in accordance to everything they've got, right? So that's the fatwa that we generally go with nowadays. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So just to summarize what we've done today, we talked about the ruling of i'tikaf, spiritual retreat for a woman, that she can do this in a designated area of her home, designated area for prayer in her home. And a person, what is allowed to do in i'tikaf: eating, drinking, sleeping, if needed, then buying and selling as well, without bringing the commodity, the sale item in the masjid. And in i'tikaf, a person is not meant to stay silent all the way. That's not ibadah, that's not worship, not part of the worship at least. And meaning a person should though speak of good. And then a person is not allowed to have sexual intercourse, not engage in foreplay or anything like that. And if they do ejaculate because of this, their fast will invalidate. And if they have sexual intercourse even without ejaculation, their i'tikaf would invalidate, should I say. And we talked about this concept of vowing to do i'tikaf. If a person does vow for 2 nights, 5 nights or 5 days, the person has to do it consecutively by default, unless they say otherwise. That was that. Then we went on to zakat. We defined zakat. We talked about zakat. There is a basic concept of giving ownership, tamlik. You have to give ownership to somebody. That's the first basic thing that is required in zakat. And so the meaning of this is that if you just allowed people, for example, you made food and you allowed them to eat, that's not you giving them ownership. You have to actually give it over to them, make them owner of it, so they can do whatever they please with this. So giving ownership, that's one basic concept. It has to be given to particular individuals that have been discussed in the Quran, which will come later. It has to be done with intention. I talked about when intention is needed. So either at the time of giving the recipient, or at the time of giving the agent, or at the time of separating that money, or when you gave the recipient, he still has it in possession. Then we talked about the it's nisab. We talked about the 2 nisabs, the nisab of wujub of zakat and nisab of hirman. So hopefully people remember, wujub of zakat is where zakat becomes obligatory on you. It has to be mal and nami, wealth that has the potential to grow, has the potential to increase. Whether it increases or not is not important. Okay, so it's in essence gold, silver, business stock, and things. Then the nisab of hirman, which is the same threshold, but anything beyond basic needs, essential needs, is included in the nisab of hirman, which will prevent a person from receiving zakat. Then we talked about the concept of year, of the hawl, 1 year passing, where 1 year has to pass on nisab, and when 1 year passes on nisab, everything you have on that day, whether it came in yesterday, even if it's a wage pack that came in yesterday, you never had that wage pack for a year. But because your year is up, everything you own on that year being up, you have to give zakat on. Okay, unless it was something which was attached to a debt, meaning you had to pay a debt, then you can minus that debt. Likewise, anything which is within your basic needs, like you have a very expensive phone, but it's your need. You need a phone, so then that's fine. That will be not included in the nisab. And then we talked about the actual nisab is 20 mithqal and 200 dirham. 20 mithqal is 20 mithqal is the same as dinar. 1 mithqal is 1 dinar. So 20 mithqal meaning 20 dinar, 20 gold coins, and 200 dirhams is the silver coins. So the equivalent values in terms of grams, 87.48 grams. 87.48 grams for the 20 mithqal, and 200 dirhams is 612.36 grams of silver.